All right, welcome everybody today to our CalTAP webinar with U.S. Vets Outside the Wire. Today we're focusing on suicide prevention through early intervention. Today is September 29th, 2021. All right, so before we get started, just some quick housekeeping things to go over. You probably received an email either last night or sometime this morning that gave you the meeting information along with some links in the email that we'll go over a bit today. Those links are going to be the Veteran Resource Book, the California Veteran Resource Book. There's a link map, and there's also instructions on how to use the chat feature here on Zoom. Talk a little bit about those coming up. I'll give a quick overview about the CalTAP program, and then we'll have Anthony Rodriguez step in to talk a little bit about the local interagency network coordinators and how they help veterans across California. And then we'll have Robert Storr from U.S. Vets Outside the Wire talk to us a little bit about some of those interventions for suicide prevention. And then afterwards, we'll do a virtual questions and answers panel where we can answer those questions that you have for the panelists. This is that PDF that you received in the email for the Zoom chat. For all the questions that you have for the panelists, please direct them to the CalTAP questions individual. Or you could put them in the chat. What we'll do is we'll use those to facilitate the questions and answers portion at the end of the webinar. And so if there are some questions that we can't answer right away, we definitely will try. But if you don't hear a response right away for your question, then just be prepared to hear it being answered later on in the webinar. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. My name is Michael Cisneros. I'm a training coordinator with the California Department of Veteran Affairs. I've been with CalTAP for a little, almost 2 years now, almost. I'm a veteran myself. I separated back in 2007. So working in a position like this where I get to go back and help veterans find those benefits that are available to them is something very fulfilling for me. I didn't have this help when I separated. So to come back and let you guys know that it's here. Hopefully I'm doing you guys right. So what is CalTAP? Well, CalTAP is a transition assistance program that is designed to support veterans and their family members, designed to help veterans, let me start over. Designed to inform and connect veterans of all eras to their earned state and federal benefits, as well as provide continuous support and assistance as their needs change over time. And so what we've done in CalTAP is we've developed different pathways to help those veterans navigate the benefits that are available to them. Those pathways are the entrepreneurship pathway, there's an employment pathway, we have an education pathway, and then there's a general core curriculum pathway that focuses on those benefits that don't fall into the topics that I just mentioned. We do have a service provider pathway. We don't really talk about that too much, but if you do have anybody within maybe your community or within your family that does want to work with veterans and just needs more information on how to work with them, or want to understand the military culture just a little bit better, they could always go to our website and check out that service provider pathway. Lots of information about how to work with veterans. This is that California Veteran Resource Book that I mentioned earlier. So you did receive a link for a PDF copy of this book. If this was an in-person event, then you would have seen a hard copy sitting in front of you right now. But since we can't do that, we're just sending out the PDF copies. I like to say that this book is like gold for veterans. So everything that we discuss when it comes to California benefits can be found in this book, along with eligibility requirements, more detailed information about the benefits, and then you could also figure out how to submit the documents or who you need to talk to get this process started. If you go to calvet.ca.gov, you can find more information about the CalTAP program. right there on the homepage. Right there in the middle of the screen, you can see the CalTAP banner. When you click on that banner, you're taken to our pathways page, which looks like this. Now, before I move on with the pathways, I just want to bring your attention to the archives link that's down there at the bottom. So since COVID happened and we went into lockdown, we started doing the webinars for veterans, and we actually covered a lot of different topics over the last almost 2 years, year and a half maybe. We've recorded them and we've posted them on our website. So if you're interested in, things like financial literacy, claims and compensation, we do stuff on employment. You could always check out those past webinars along with the PowerPoints that we used at the same time. You can download those and use them for resources, contact information if you need it. All right, so how do I use CalTAP online? Well, this example will start with the core curriculum. If you just click on any one of those pathways, it's going to take you to a modules page. With the core curriculum pathway, your modules page looks like this. They talk about everything from VA healthcare system, claims and compensation. There's a financial literacy module down at the bottom. But if you're just kind of curious about what's available to you through California, you can always click on module number 5, California benefits, and that will break it down for you. So what are those benefits? This information starts on chapter 1, page 13 for California benefits. One of the main ones that we get questions on is the college tuition and fee waiver. Now, the college tuition and fee waiver is actually a fee waiver that's meant for child dependents, not for the veteran. This waives tuition and fees at any state-funded school, so any UC, CSU, or California Community College. And it saves a veteran over $35 million a year. And the reason why this benefit is for the child dependent is because we want the veteran to not have to stress about transferring their education benefits to their dependent because they want to send their dependent to school. So in this case, you're able to use your own education benefits and also send your child to school at the same time. There are 4 different plans: Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, and Plan D. We see most veterans fall into Plan B because this is because it requires a disability rating between 0 and 100. So the veteran has to have a disability rating between 0 and 100. And at the same time, they'll also be looking at your child's income level just to make sure that it doesn't go over the federal poverty line. Now, if you have a spouse that wants to use this benefit, there is a way. You just have to see if you're eligible for Plan A, Plan C, or Plan D. If you are eligible for Plan A, C, or D, then you have the opportunity to actually give this benefit to your spouse, or you can give it to your dependent, either or. DMV programs, we work with the DMV to make it easier for individuals to identify themselves as a veteran. So now you can actually have that word veteran printed on your driver's license. So this just makes it so that you don't have to walk around with a DD Form 214 in your back pocket. That document has sensitive information on it, and if you don't have to carry it around anymore, then you shouldn't have to. There's also the Honoring Veterans License Plate Program. This program is actually open to everybody in California. It's not just a veteran-specific program. All proceeds for this program actually go towards veteran services across California. So it's a pretty cool program that helps veteran CVSOs across the state. And there's also the motor vehicle registration fee waiver. This is for individuals with a 100% disability rating, and your disability rating has to affect your mobility. If you think that you qualify for this benefit, we definitely recommend speaking with your local county veteran service office, and they can tell you more about eligibility requirements and also getting the process started for you. Outdoor activities, for those of you that like to be outdoors, we have fishing and hunting license available at a reduced annual cost. And there's also a state park pass that's offered at no cost. Both of these benefits do require an honorable discharge and a 50% disability rating or higher. However, for the state park pass, you would have had to be serving within a wartime period to actually be eligible for this benefit. Tax programs. We don't talk about tax programs too much just because they differ across California, but there are different tax programs for disabled veterans, property tax exemptions, business license and tax fee exemptions. And there's also a disabled veteran business enterprise program for those veterans who want to open up their own business. The reason why we don't talk about these too much is just because they do differ across California. Eligibility requirements differ across California. So if you are interested, we definitely recommend you speak with your local county tax assessor, and they could tell you more about these programs. Home loans, Calvette home loans. We have a home loans program that's different than the federal VA home loans program. So our Calvette home loans program provides financing for veterans, competitive market interest rates, low, no down payment requirements as well. A great program for those of you that are in the market right now to buy a home. What I can do is I could put a contact in the chat for Brad Pedersen. Brad Pedersen is pretty much the home loans guru. We use him all the time for these webinars. He knows a lot about the program, loves helping out veterans too. So if you are in the market, we'll put his contact information in the chat. We definitely recommend reaching out to him. He loves taking phone calls and understands that we're giving out his contact information on these things. So, you know, he's prepared to take random calls if he needs to. For our women veterans, we have a program that provides information, advocacy, outreach, and support. This program is actually partnered with the California Women Veterans Leadership Council. And so, you know, it's just there to give our women veterans more support, more opportunities within their community, and just kind of be aware of what's going on with the division. Their webpage can be found at calvet.ca.gov, and along with information about the division, you can also sign up on their roster, just so that you can be aware of some outreach opportunities that are coming up as well. Our minority veterans, we have another program that also offers information, advocacy, outreach, and support. This program also helps our unnaturalized veterans with citizenship and naturalization services. And more information about their program can be found under the minority and underrepresented veterans webpage. All right, Calvette Homes for Long-Term Care. So most of you probably aren't thinking about this right now, but you know, if you are, or maybe you have somebody within your community or family that is a veteran that does need services like this, there are eight different locations throughout California that provide long-term care for veterans. These homes offer medical, dental, pharmacy, rehabilitation, and social activities. And they're found everywhere from Chula Vista down south all the way up to Redding up north. State cemeteries, probably another something else that you're probably not thinking about right now. But if you do have somebody within your community or a family member that is looking for these kind of services, there are 3 different veteran cemeteries here in California. So these are state cemeteries. State cemeteries, not the federal VA cemeteries. So 3 different state cemeteries. There's one in Seaside, California, which is right outside of Monterey. There's another one in Redding, California. And then there's the Yountville Veterans Home Cemetery, which is in Yountville, California. That's right outside of Napa. Now, to be buried at that Yountville Veterans Home Cemetery, you do have to be a resident living in the home. So if that's not your case, then you do have the other 2 to pick from. All right, now before I pass it on, I just want to bring your attention to a couple websites that we think you should be familiar with as a veteran. The first one is va.gov. I like to think of va.gov as kind of like a hub for veterans. So, you know, whether you're looking for information about the VA healthcare system or want to apply information about your records, disability claims and compensation, or even education benefits, you can always go to this website and it will direct you to where you need to go to get those processes started. There's also Ebenefits. Ebenefits is a cool website that I was going to a lot when I was in school. This website is where you'll go to also fill out applications for your benefits. For example, when I was going to school, I was taking advantage of my education benefits. Every month they would pay me BAH for the classes that I was taking. And they would also certify my classes and pay tuition and fees. So I would come onto this website every semester just to see if, did they already certify my classes? Did they already pay my tuition and fees? Did they cut the check for the BAH? And have they sent that out yet? So this is that website where you could find that information. And then finally, My Healthy Vet. I like this website a lot. This is a website that you'll use if you are taking advantage of the VA healthcare system. On this website, you could check out your healthcare records, make appointments with your primary care physician, message with them, and also refill prescriptions. All right, so that's a quick overview about the CalTAP program. There's a lot more out there for veterans. If you guys have any questions or just want to kind of stay up to date and be aware of what's going on with the CalTAP program, you can always just provide your non-DoD email to caltap at calvet.ca.gov, and we can make sure that you're on that list. You can always go to our Facebook page and like us on Facebook to stay in touch, or register through My Calvet on our homepage. That's my contact information. If you have any questions about what I covered, you just want to know a little bit more about what's out there, feel free to reach out, and also like us on Facebook. So now I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Anthony Rodriguez. Anthony is our local interagency network coordinator, and he's going to quickly talk to you about how they help veterans across California and what they could do for you in your region. So go ahead, Anthony, when you're ready.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me on. Pleasure to be here and to join Robert and the rest of the team. So just let me make this quick and tell you about how I can help you if you have any individual issues. Next page, please. I am a link. So I am a local interagency network coordinator. You can see a map here. California has 8 persons like myself who cover a large area of the state. I, in particular, cover Los Angeles and Ventura County. I am responsible for nearly 300,000 vets in the 2 counties. And as you can see through this map, that we have individuals that cover the San Diego area, Orange County, the Inland Empire, Central Valley of California, Central Coast, the Bay Area, and Northern California. The point is that if you or anyone you know who's a vet needs assistance in finding local resources, you can go to us, and that's our job to connect you. Next page, please. As I mentioned, I do a lot of outreach. I do outreach to veterans, the National Guard, Reserve. Sometimes I talk to employees, large organizations. I'm a member of a number of associations and collaboratives. The point is that I'm looking to find the best resources so that if you have a call, you have a question, I can direct you to someone who I have a personal relationship with, hopefully. Additionally, I'm a member of the State of California Office of Emergency Services. So should there be an emergency, I would in particular handle the needs of veterans in any respective area, in the respective area that I'm in right now. Also, I provide leadership and advocacy as is needed in the area that I'm in the various locations as required. Next page. So if you need assistance in finding help with employment, I have a number of contacts with the America's Job Centers at EDD. We have a new VPAN program here in Los Angeles. I have a lot of connections there with nonprofits, also with other state benefits. I do meet others, as I mentioned. The DOR program is a great one. For example, for additional income, should your GI Bill run out. And contacts at the Healthcare Center and the VBA, the Benefits Administration, the Cemetery Association, Cemetery Administration as well. So point is, I can help you, direct you where you need to go. All right, final page. Here's my contact information with my working cell. And if I can help you in any way, let me know, and be glad to do so. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Michael. And I think we're going to hear our main speaker. Thank you much.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Anthony. Very important person there within the LA region, has lots of connections. So if you are looking for outside resources or local resources, definitely use that link map and reach out to your local interagency network coordinator, and they could help you out. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to the main event, Robert Storr. Robert Storr is the Executive Director for U.S. Vets Outside the Wire, and he's going to talk to you about suicide prevention through early interventions and just understanding some of those trigger points that get us there. So go ahead, Robert, when you're ready.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everybody, for the opportunity to be here. And also thank you all for the amazing work you do. We so value the continued partnership. Anthony, Michael, all the work you're doing across the state is incredible. So I have a lot of information here, but I certainly don't expect everybody to master it all. But I want to give you some key points. So I'll move through this pretty quickly. Next slide. So U.S. Vets is the largest nonprofit across the country working to end veteran homelessness. My particular site at Patriotic Hall in downtown Los Angeles is really working on the front end of that, which is what this presentation is about. How can we begin to really make sure the next generation of veterans coming home don't end up in trouble? And working with Calvette and opportunities like this is key. We also have a mental health program on community college campuses, which I'm representing today, our Outside the Wire program. I am a clinician, and formerly I was a director for the Suicide Prevention Center for Los Angeles. And as Anthony pointed out, covers quite a huge area of about 100,000. I'm sorry, over 11 million people here in the Los Angeles area. We also have a program for women veterans, our career development initiative for employment, a training program for veterans, and a housing program. But next slide. I'm here to talk to you primarily about suicide prevention. So I'm going to go right into that. Next slide. Basically, I just want to give you a brief history. It's important because it's relative. The Suicide Prevention Center began right here in California, and it was actually started by two veterans who were working in the VA hospital in Brentwood. They saw a rise in suicide in the late 50s. This is important because prior to this, we didn't do a lot of suicide prevention because we did not even understand that it was preventable. They did an experiment, at least one of them, where they were looking at suicide notes, and they asked the coroner to make fictitious ones versus real ones, and they were going to see if they could tell the difference. Well, they did. And what they determined was that the real notes contained what they called ambivalence. What they found out that people that died by suicide did not want to die, but were struggling to live with the pain. What that meant was if we could figure out how to help them deal with the pain or the mental health issues that were contributing, we could save their lives. This was the very first time in the country, and we think in the world, where people actually found out suicide was preventable. So it's not that long ago. What happened then in the 60s when Marilyn Monroe died, they were called upon again to rule whether that was a homicide or suicide. And when they determined it was a suicide, all of a sudden they received calls all throughout the United States of people who were feeling the same way, and they discovered we had a national issue with suicide. And so they began the first crisis center right here with those calls, and they began to help people understand there are ways. But most importantly, they found out that people who, again, were struggling had the concept of ambivalence, the simultaneous desire to want to live and the simultaneous desire to die. So they figured out how they could work with that. Next slide. So basically, we know there's, and you can kind of click through this. We know that there are over 12 million people with thoughts. Only, an immense amount, about 10% attempts. But the thing to keep in mind here is 47,000, which is a huge number, died by suicide. But there's a lot of room between the thoughts and the people that died. Go ahead and clicking through. We know that also we lost 6,200 veterans, which is 14%, which is way too many. Now, the good news is that is trending down. At one point, we're losing close to 20% of the suicides were veterans, but now we're on our way down. So it means we are making a difference. Next slide. But what it means for us is basically what we can do is we can begin to narrow down who we need to look at. And this is important. Not everybody's a veteran is going to die by suicide. In fact, the number is small still. It's 17 out of every 100,000 vets. It's a significant number and one we want to change and intercede. But the thing is, we never want to stereotype or put everybody in one category. We know the most often suicide is in middle-aged veterans, middle-aged white men, and that men die 4 times more often than women. And the reason this is important is we want to know where can we put our efforts. We also know that firearms accounted for the deaths. Next slide. If you look at heart disease and what the medical community has done is we really want to look at what makes one person more likely to die by suicide than another. In the medical community, when we look at heart disease, we look at high blood pressure, high cholesterol, weight, exercise, family history. So we know that particular part of the population that may be at higher risk is the one where we devote the efforts. Same thing with suicide prevention. We know that there is not a single cause for suicide. And we know suicide is often a complex interaction between risk and protective factors. So we need to figure out what the risk factors are so we can understand what protective factors will offset that. And that's what we're doing here today. Next slide. And I'll try to get through this quickly, guys, so I can get some questions. So what we look at briefly is all of the factors on the left are potential risk factors. In other words, they raise the capability or the likelihood that someone may die. On the other side is the protective factors. These are things we can do to mitigate the risk factors, things we can do today, like provide more access to mental health, a sense of connectedness at a time where we're really isolated. People who are suicidal or under stress often forget or lose the ability to problem solve correctly, a sense of mission, purpose, support for health, employment, and social emotional well-being. Next slide. So what we also know that if we work with this, and you can go ahead and click through this as well, we want to keep it really sort of general in a sense. We want to look at these categories. If someone has had a previous attempt, if they're struggling with a mental health condition, if they're also dealing with the substance abuse, and the reason that's in red is a good 50% of the time, people who die by suicide are dealing with a substance abuse issue on top of it. If they've had previous exposure to trauma, and lastly, and most importantly, if they have all these factors or a group of factors that are associated with this and they're in a crisis, then we want to make sure we pay attention. Next slide. And what that means is we need to look at how does risk reach crisis, and here's how it does. First, you've got to look at the idea of desire. Desire in and of itself is not necessarily a dangerous thing. You saw that many people had the desire to die by suicide, but often did not go on to even attempt. Actually, we know that thoughts of suicide are a symptom of a depression. What raises it more is if they've thought about how they would do it, capability. So we always set for that, or if they've had a previous attempt, and you can go ahead and click through here. And lastly, the intent. How likely is somebody with those risk factors to die by suicide? That's what gets us into a crisis. Next slide. So what we know is we have to take all of this into consider. And what we do is we look at what is the perspective of somebody who is more likely to die. What it is somebody's reached a crisis. They have one or more of these risk factors, some historical biological evidence now that some people may have brain differentiations between their ability to control impulse and problem solve, but they're in a painful situation, and what's happened is their thinking's become limited. Next slide. What happens when most of us reach a crisis is we lose perspective, and often our brain sort of shuts down. We forget that there are other options available, and we get an immense amount of pain. And if any of you have ever gone through a day where you've had a bad breakup, a difficult job situation, or an emotional issue, a loss of some kind, all of a sudden things seem really dark and difficult. And actually what's happening is your brain is actually seeking to do what we call emotional congruence. It's looking for thoughts to match the feeling. What that means is oftentimes we think we are in more distress than we actually are, and it's difficult to navigate through that. Next slide. So the reality is we have to look at this. What are the warning signs? We look at three areas: feelings, we look at behaviors, and we look at last actually statements. What we know is somebody who is in danger of dying by suicide, if they're having a significant change in these areas, depression, manic behavior, anxiety, if they're withdrawing more, they're reckless, agitated, oftentimes they're on the verge of a crisis. So we need to intervene precisely at this time. Next slide. So again, just a reminder, we're looking at these particular areas. If you're talking to somebody, you're dealing with a family member or a friend, the most important thing I can tell you today is we have to be the one that makes it safe for them to talk about it. We have to talk about the reason they may be helpless, or if they're feeling more anxious, or recognize if their anger is accelerating or they're engaging in risky activities, increasing their use of alcohol or drug, or withdrawing. Then it may mean, if we've had the history that we know that they're in danger, that we need to talk to them and let them know it's safe. Next slide. To really start the discussion. But here's how you evaluate that risk. You look at these four major components: desire, capability, and intent. So you can evaluate, is this just somebody with thoughts, or is this somebody I need to intervene? Again, the most important thing is, can we make this important fact known to them? Finally, we hope we'll find buffers. Next slide. So what we're looking at again are these three areas, and go ahead and click through. Number one, desire. Have you been thinking about killing yourself? Capability. Have you ever tried? And you see that goes into yellow, which means now we have someone who may have an elevated risk. And lastly, intent. How likely are you to ask on those particular thoughts? Next slide. If we can differentiate between those and remember this most important fact, the people that die by suicide are not wanting to die. In fact, what they're trying to do is deal with their simultaneous desire and how to stay alive, but their desire to end the pain that they're in. And Edmund Schneidman, who wrote over 20 books, coined the term of psychache. What is it about mental health pain that we can get a handle on so we can help these people? Next slide. So what we know again is this, that here's some basic assessment questions. And again, you can click through these pretty quickly, Michael. But the first one is on the area of desire. Again, so how can we look at, are you thinking about it? Have you had thoughts? Have you felt like a burden or hopeless? Do you feel trapped, or have you been feeling intolerably alone? A lot of people may be feeling those. A lot of people may be even thinking about it. But again, desire in and of itself is not necessarily that dangerous. However, it still gives us an entry to talk about it and to make it safe and let someone know, you can talk about this with me and it's okay to discuss it. Next slide. And again, the next question would be, if you're concerned about somebody who has desires, have you had a previous attempt? Have you ever lost someone to suicide? A lot of people, especially veterans, have lost friends or family members and have access to firearms, maybe coping with some of the issues or difficulties they're dealing with drugs or alcohol, and maybe having trouble regulating the mood. If this is somebody that you're worried about, again, the crisis line, the VA crisis line, is not only there for someone in distress, but it's there to provide information, or you're able to contact a provider who's taking care, or if you're able just to contact a resource that can help you get a handle. Next slide. But again, desire and capability is not necessarily the only key. The last one that is most important is if you make it safe for someone to talk about it. What we found on the crisis line when I was there, that almost 95% of the time, if we just got someone to talk about it and we listened closely, we could help them de-escalate the situation and we could help them stay alive. So the last and most important question is, if you are feeling the desire, if you do have the thoughts, and if you have a history that makes it more likely that you might die by suicide, are you able to keep yourself today? One of the things I did as the clinical director for the Suicide Prevention Center here in Los Angeles, I worked with people who had newly been released from the hospital, who actually had really wanted to try to die by suicide. And some of them still wanted to die by suicide. So I was a clinician at the time, I still am, and clinicians have what we call a limit of confidentiality, where if someone threatens to hurt themselves or someone else, we can violate their confidentiality, or we can break it, not really violate, but we can break it, and then we can go to somebody and either warn them or get help for the individual. So how was I going to tell these people to tell me they wanted to die and still keep it confidential? Well, what I was able to do is, you can talk about the desire to die, you can talk about wanting to die, as long as you can tell me you're going to be safe and you're okay, and I get you into treatment and support, I can de-escalate. And I'll tell you what, after working with people for a year in groups, people could take care of themselves. The other thing we know is, if you connect them to a crisis line or the Veterans Crisis Line, they can help de-escalate somebody who's in an immediate crisis, or you can talk to them about how to get help for somebody who's in immediate crisis. Next slide. So the reality is, we have desire, capability, and intent, but last, we were looking for buffers. What is the reason that somebody wants to die? They're still calling the Suicide Prevention Center, reaching out for help. The reality is, remember ambivalence. People don't want to die. They're just seeking a reason or a reminder of a reason why they want to stay alive. So you can ask these questions. Do you have people in your life that care about you? What's the reason that even though you want to die, you're still here? Do you know anybody else that knows what's happening with you? Do you have a purpose, or you've thought about why you're here? Thought about who would miss you if you're not here? How connected to you, to other people, do you feel? And then you can help them become connected. Next slide. Again, remembering that all the time while we're doing the assessment, we wanted to do this. So how do you approach somebody who's feeling suicidal? First of all, you remain calm. You talk to them directly about if they've been thinking. Secondly, you build a sense of rapport. Can you tell me what's going on? Can you bring me into your world? Can you give me some information about how bad it is for you? And you listen with empathy. and you listen for the reason they want to die so that they can also listen for the reason they want to stay alive. If you can listen to that, you can remind them in the last area the reason there are other options. You can help them explore the options maybe that they forgot about. And at the end, you summarize and get them some support. So this again is what we train people to do. But if you're a layperson and you're concerned with somebody and you found somebody who's really in danger, remember, most of the time you can de-escalate or you can get them to somebody who can help them de-escalate. Next slide. So just a quick reminder, don't ever take suicide off the table, even if I think it's the worst idea in the world and has a tragic consequence, which of course most of us, if not all of us, do. The reality is that individual suffering may be thinking about it. And if we tell them it's not okay, or he or she is not okay, or they shouldn't think about it, or they shouldn't do it, or it's really bad, or how could they, all of those things negate that person's desire to die. What that does is also stops them from wanting to talk to you. Because when we're feeling that bad for some people, that may just be an option that they never have to use. But knowing they can use it helps them get through the day. So we don't ever take it off the table. We don't also make it convenient or talk about the possibilities being a good idea. But we do discuss the ambivalence, that people who want to die most of the time want to stay alive. And if we can discuss that and figure out what is the reason you're still alive, what's the reason you're struggling, what can we do to help you remember that? If we can identify the buffers, if we can remind someone why they want to be here, if we can reinforce the reason to fight with that desire, oftentimes people will do that. Oftentimes you can just listen and people will come up with that. If you listen to the reason people are struggling, they will sooner or later come up with the answer. One of the things that I love about being a clinician this long in my life is I've learned that I don't have to have the answer. In fact, it's pretty arrogant if I think that you in your 25, 30, 40 years of living, somehow I have an answer that you haven't thought of. And the reality is I don't have any idea all the things you've tried or the things that have worked in the past or the things that don't work. But guess what? If I talk to you about those and I ask you those questions, you will also identify those much quicker than me. Plus, if you come up with those concepts rather than me tell you, they will make more sense to you because they will be in your brain and not just my brain. Go ahead and click through, Michael. So remember, leave suicide on the table, discuss ambivalence, identify buffers, and then talk to the person about alternatives. In your financial situation, in your relationship loss, in your job crisis, in your mental or physical health issue, have you gotten treatment? Have you gotten support? What have you thought about? Again, not what have I thought about that will work for you. What has worked for you in the past? What will work for you? What have you done? If you can remember to ask the person and not provide the solution, they oftentimes will come up with that. Of course, you can provide the ability to stay safe. Safety planning is something most therapists do, so I won't go into that today, but you can connect them to the crisis line or resources. One of the things I did when I was working with people who were suicidal is I was working a short distance from where our crisis line volunteers were taking calls. And one thing I did was I would call the crisis line with the people that were feeling that way. And we would put someone on the line, a volunteer that wasn't busy, and talk to them. And when I found out that people that were feeling suicidal didn't want to call the crisis line, that I had to learn how to make it safe for them to call the crisis line because they were embarrassed, they were ashamed, they were embarrassed by the feelings. Of course, they shouldn't be, because that's a mental health condition or a stressor or a biochemical issue in their brain or a neurological issue that's functioning differently than someone who's non-suicidal. But still, because of the societal stigma or shame, they wouldn't reach out. So if we reach out for them or support them in, they would ask the volunteers, well, don't you think poorly of people that call in, or what do you think? And the volunteers would always tell them, listen, I'm here for you. This is the reason I'm here. This is the reason I do what I do. So the reality is sometimes you just need to connect people to resources. Next slide. Okay, this I borrowed from Dee Hirsch. I want to give them credit, Suicide Prevention Center. This is the model we as people on the crisis line or sometimes clinicians will listen. So you see at the very top, the biggest part is just about establishing rapport. How can you connect with somebody, listen to their problems, ask them what's going on, gather information? You don't have to ask a lot of sophisticated questions. A lot of times a crisis line call will start by just saying, tell me what's going on with you. In the middle, you see that risk assessment. This is what people who are trained do. They'll ask about those areas of desire, capability, and intent. Are you just having thoughts? Are you having thoughts, or have you thought as far as how you would do it or when you would do it or why you would do it? Or are you worried that you can't stay safe? Again, almost over 90% of the time, we can help even people who wanted to die by suicide learn to stay safe. If you see on the bottom of gather after gather information is alternatives. If you listen long enough, again, people will present alternatives. They'll come up with mostly their own answers, and then you explore what those are and how to get them connected, and you remind them at the end of that. Next slide. So again, what we want to know is we want to listen. If you do nothing else, the people that you're concerned about, listen and tell them it's okay to talk and that you'll help provide help, whether the help be calling a crisis line or getting them the support. If you ask them directly for somebody you're concerned about, and this is difficult, has it gotten so bad that you want to kill yourself? Have you thought about that? I know that people in your situation, I know that some veterans who are stressed have thought about suicide. Is that something you've been thinking about? If you can get them and let them know, hey, you know what? It's okay for you to tell me that. It doesn't mean we need to do anything, but it does, alert me that I want to be here for you. If you can uncover the ambivalence, the reason someone wants to die, but the reason they're still wanting to stay alive, and remind them of that reason. If you can express empathy, if you can say, hey, I've been there, I've been in dark times, or hey, I don't know how bad it is, but I'm here for you. If you can help them discover the reasons they want to stay alive, whether it's to take care of their dog, their cat, their parents would miss them, their husband, their wife would not be able to go on, their kids would be upset. If you can remind people what a difference they make in the world when they've forgotten because they've been hopeless, oftentimes you can save a life. And finally, if you can discuss ways, that they can stay safe. If someone's in danger and has a firearm, if you can tell them, can we put your firearm away? Can we store it temporarily at someone else's house, which is now legal in California? If you can limit the access to means, oftentimes a crisis will pass. The other thing about it is if people decided they wanted to die by suicide by using a firearm and the firearm's away, what we know is most of the time they don't change the means. They don't look for pills or something else. You've eliminated the crisis possibility right there. So limiting access to means or helping someone, it's not about taking guns away, it's about keeping guns safely away for someone who's in crisis. Next slide. So we're coming up to pretty close to the end here. Just a reminder, again, if you're dealing with someone who is in danger and you want to talk about it, know that if someone's having a difficult life issue, you can help them with their problem solving, whether it be career or employment. Thank you, Jeff, for that. Assist is amazing training. Isolation, if someone's feeling isolated, to really be able to connect them. If someone's having mental health issues, to be able to provide treatment options. If someone's under stress, if you can remind them the stresses and the capability and the things they've done in the past to get through that, what you remind people is how much resilience we really all have. People forget that. People forget that the majority of us have been through really tough times or tough times in our life and we've survived. That means that is within us. And sometimes just people need to be reminded. And if someone is in crisis, that's time to get them to a professional or get them to help. Someone can de-escalate them professionally, either on a crisis line or a mental health professional, to let them know they can get to the other side. Because almost always, if not always, people can be helped to get to the other side. Next slide. So that brings me to the end, an opportunity for questions. I know I did that really fast, but the most important thing to remember is if you can be comfortable asking, if you can become comfortable asking this. I'll finish with just a brief story. When I first became director of the Suicide Prevention Center in Los Angeles, working with a team of volunteers and some clinicians who were working with hundreds of thousands of people across the county of LA, Riverside, Ventura, and Orange, and talking to people. I had a friend who was in a crisis, a friend who had been a successful manager of a successful restaurant, which had gone out of business. That restaurant had gone out of business. That friend was now out of income. Not only had income, but that friend had friends that had invested in that. And the people that had invested, he wasn't able to pay back. So he was in a pretty dire strait. And I was thinking, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to ask him what I've already been taught and been teaching people to do. So I did. I came up to one day on the phone and I said, have you been, has it gotten so bad you've thought about taking your life? He said, yes, it has gotten bad. So he was having thoughts. So then I had to go on to the next stage. I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do now? So then I went on to the next stage and said, has it gotten so bad that you've thought about how you would do it? He said, yeah, I've thought about how I would do it. He told me how I would do it. So then I thought, okay, this guy is in trouble. So I finally went to the last part of that. I had discussed his thoughts and his desires. I had discussed how he would do it, his capability. And I went on to intention. Are you in danger of doing that? Has God so bad you really think you would do it? The answer is no. No, I was just having thoughts, but thank you for asking. What it did, what it allowed this person to de-escalate. And it also gave me the safety to know that I was brave enough to ask him and to understand that there were ways to mitigate the crisis by being able just to provide him support and asking him just about the intent. So again, you can determine someone's level of risk and if you need to intercede or if you've been okay. But above all, please know that sometimes you may be the only one that's gotten this training. You may be the only one that's brave enough to ask him, and you can always ask for help to get that support. So I want to thank you for your attention. Again, I want to thank Calvette for the opportunity. I hope this information is helpful. There's a lot of more information. If you do have additional questions, you can feel free to email me at that email address or reach out. There are tons of resources at the VA. The VA Crisis Line is an outstanding resource. The Crisis Line in and of itself for LA is available. There are clinicians and experts throughout the area, but the VA Crisis Line and Crisis Line are also really good areas to start. So thanks for your attention. I'll take any questions if we have a couple minutes here.
Yeah, actually, we're going to move into the questions and answers portion right now. This is everybody's contact information who spoke today. Derek Rose is actually the one who's handling the chat as we speak. And so I'm actually going to hand it over to Derek to bring up those questions that some of the participants, or I'm sorry, some of the attendees had for the panelists. So go ahead, Derek, when you're ready.
Thank you, Michael. I think these questions are actually to all the hosts and panelists. So if you've been designated a panelist, you can also view these questions in your chat feature as well. So Robert, I think some of these questions best geared for your subject matter knowledge. So if you're able to pull up some of those questions that have been that chat to the panelists, maybe you can provide your feedback on some of those questions. See those. If not, I can read those out loud, and maybe you can provide your assistance.
Actually, Derek, I'm sorry, Robert, are you able to hear Derek?
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, Derek. Hello. You're going a little bit in and out, but if I heard you correctly, I think you said to go ahead and look at the questions in the tab and see if I want to provide, or if any of us want to provide responses. Is that correct?
Yes, sorry, must have been breaking up there for a second. So I think all the questions are in that panelist tab. So maybe if you could maybe kind of scroll through those and provide your expertise on those if you can get to those questions.
Sure, absolutely. I can take a couple right off the bat. Jeff, thanks for the question. How many states are reporting veteran suicide? More states are starting to report. I believe all 50 states do. And we're getting better about actually gathering statistics here in Los Angeles. We're getting ready to do a veteran suicide review board so we can start to understand more of the factors that play into it. But I believe all 50 states are reporting, which is where they give the information. There's some great resources on the VA website as well. They've done studies in over 50 million records. I think it's over been a 10 to 15 year period to really analyze the problem. That's how they discerned that there was more difficulty now in younger veterans coming up. I don't know the question about Calvet, whether you're working with other organizations like the VFW or American Legion.
Let me take this the next question. What is Calvet doing to help homeless vets in California? And just real quick, Calvet has several areas where we're helping. One is we have 8 retirement homes, which Michael mentioned. So these are homes for senior veterans. They tend to be 80 and 90 years old. We have approximately 3,000 veterans, which we assist, one in West Los Angeles. So they provide care from assisted living, dependent living, all the way up to Alzheimer's care. Additionally, we have home loans, which help veterans buy a home. As was mentioned, we work with the VA to purchase a home. We actually are a lender. We're a home loan mortgage lender. And we have in particular one program where it's in Palmdale, where you can buy a home at about $100,000 below market value. So it's for a first-time buyer. So that's a very beneficial program. And then we have another program called VHHP, Veteran Housing Homeless Program, where every quarter Calvet provides $75 million to agencies like US Vets and others to build housing. And I know there's a project that US Vets, I don't think it's at Robert's particular division, but within the greater umbrella to help build housing projects in compliance with the counties. And that's done throughout the state, and that just was reapproved. So I think that's a a general answer to that one question. I'll turn it back over.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yes, we're working to build what will soon be the largest veteran housing facility in the United States here in the West Los Angeles VA. But no, we appreciate all the support that Calvette is providing to that. So there were several questions about the risk or protective factors about additional training. I know that if you look at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, AFSP.org, or you look at the VA site, most of those sites have charts that contain the risk and protective factors. People have asked for additional trainings. There are several ways to get it. If you are in the area and would like a 30-minute training and it's something I'm able to do or provide, I'm happy to support that. There are also a crisis line in your community, or the VA in your community has trainings as well. I was at a conference last Friday where the VA did a really outstanding job of training as well. Someone asked about role play videos. That's not something I do. However, you could contact, again, the crisis line in your area. They could probably work that out with you. I do know that most crisis lines are run by paraprofessionals. That means they're non-licensed persons who go through the training, and they actually do an immense amount of role play to get them comfortable doing what I just did. All of that information was condensed from some of the trainings I've had at D.D. Hirsch and some of my own information. So that's a lot of information that I hope gave you some insight, but certainly don't expect you to master, and know that there's a lot more support out there. I just wanted to get some of that basic information out to you, how you can discern what's a high risk versus what's a low risk, and how you can, if you're able to get your staff comfortable doing that. The gold standard of suicide prevention is really getting everybody comfortable talking about it. And so if we can get everybody talking about it, from the receptionist on to the clinical director, we'll make it safe for people to talk about it. And pretty soon we'll make it safe for people to get the help they need, so we can prevent it. We are well on the way. The veteran suicide rate has been trending down. It's been trending down for the first time in a couple of years, which means the VA and some organizations like Calvette are doing an amazing job about getting the information out. So I thank you for the opportunity. Hope that's helpful.
Yeah, let me address this other question. Is Calvette working with organizations like VFW or American Legion to prevent suicides? And yes, we are. As Robert just mentioned, we'll be attending an LA County suicide prevention review. And among those agencies that will be attending is Calvette and a few of the other veteran service organizations. So we remain open to working with them. And as you know, we kind of come from a different point of view because we're state funded. A lot of what we do as Calvette is governed by the legislature and the areas that they appoint for us to do, whereas a lot of the other organizations are nonprofits, and so they can do some things a little different. But generally, we're very open. I think, as a matter of fact, we're very open. We try to work together because it's about helping the vets. I think all of us are here for that main reason.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I just wanted to actually say for the person who's asking about the VA home loan, I did put Brad Pedersen's contact information in the chat. I just did it maybe about a minute or two ago. So for that question, I would definitely recommend reaching out to Brad, because Brad has, on top of resources you could find, through the state, he's also knowledgeable about local resources and outside resources that you could probably get into as well. So I would definitely recommend reaching out to Brad. I gave his phone number and his email address. Like I said, he encourages us to give out his phone number. So if you want to give him a quick call, and leave a message, if you don't get a hold of him, he'll definitely get back to you as soon as he can. But he's definitely the person you want to talk to about that kind of information.
Robert, could you address the question related to veteran suicide and the withdrawal from Afghanistan? Do you have information about that yet?
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think that'll probably be the last question we have time for. But what we've seen across the board from all our clinical staff across the United States with U.S. vets, and here in LA and Orange County as well, there have been more concern, obviously, and distress over what's happened. And we've been fielding calls and providing discussion groups, as I know many of other organizations have been doing as well. What we don't know at this point, because the suicide statistics we get are generally about a year later. So we don't know if there will be an impact to veteran suicide. The good news is more organizations, and I mean this, are getting out front. When I began my profession 8 or 9 years ago in the field, there was not the amount of information like Calvette, VPAN, that were out front to really get the information out and the mental health support. Calvette is supporting mental health on community college campuses, which is huge, because the biggest trend in veteran suicide is in our 18 to 29-year-old veterans. So I think just talks like this and making sure, if you take away nothing from today but the opportunity to really know that it's okay to talk about it, that you can talk about it with people, and many times if you can talk about it, you can save a life. And if you need, by all means, consult with your clinicians, with the VA crisis line. They're there not only to take care of people who are in crisis, but they're there to take care of you in terms of how you think or how you approach someone in crisis. So this information, although it seems sort of easy on the front end, is difficult sometimes to implement, but there's a lot of support. I think there's one more question coming in, or do you see another question?
Do we have any other questions, Michael?
You know what? I think we're actually gonna, let me see. Oh, somebody did raise their hand. Let's see. Yeah, let's just go ahead and take this last question and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. I'm gonna go ahead and allow you to talk. You should be able to unmute yourself now. No? Okay. All right. Maybe that was a mistake. So for that individual who has their hand raised, if you want to, for your question, whoever it's for, just feel free to reach out. That's our contact information right there. We'd be more than happy to answer the question, whatever it is. But let's go ahead and wrap up the questions and answers portion. Before we move on to the next slide and finish, I just wanted to bring your attention to the chat. Derek did throw in the post-webinar survey link. And if you could fill that out, or if you want to take the time to fill that out, please feel free to do it. It's not mandatory, but it does give us the information that we need to know. You know, are we giving you good information? You know, what else do you want us to talk about? Did we do anything well today? What can we work on for the next time? So that's just the information that we want to get from these surveys. You were also sent an email. So please take, if you have the chance and you want to, take the time to fill it out and let us know. We have some upcoming webinars for the month of October. Some of these are being hosted through college campuses across California. Just to let you know, you do not have to be a student to attend them. You can just go to our Eventbrite page and sign up there. Information on the VRE program, supporting your college savings, claims and appeals. So definitely feel free to check it out. And with that being said, I do want to say thank you for being here today. Contact information is right there. If you have any questions about what we discussed, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll definitely get those answers for you. Thanks for being here and we will see you at the next one. Goodbye.